Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining. We're going to just wait a couple minutes to let people get into the room. So feel free to enjoy this beautiful title slide and we'll wait for some folks to join. So just hang tight. Thank you. We're just waiting a little bit longer for some more folks to join, but we'll be starting any minute now. Thanks for your patience. All right, we can get going now. So thanks so much for joining, everyone. My name's Jimmy Doyle. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Luminate. I'm really excited to take you through our streaming viewership tool, hopefully show you some exciting and interesting data throughout the way and give you a sense of what it is that we're tracking here. So if you've seen the site before, a lot has changed. We're going to get into a lot of our new features, including our new demographic data, and I'll be happy to show that to you. And then if this is your first time seeing it, welcome. And we're really excited to show you what we got here. So just for a little bit of background, and I'll go really briefly through the background and methodology so we can get right into the data. But a couple things you should know. What we're tracking here in Streaming Viewership M, this is US only viewership. And we're tracking original titles and library series across all of the major players in SVOD. So we're tracking everything on streaming, of course, Netflix, Paramount, Disney. We're also tracking originals from Tubi. So we go really deep in terms of what it is that we have here. One of the things that's really important to note is we're reporting data on a rolling 24-hour basis. So we're seeing data up to yesterday in our platform. So we're able to see things on this really, really fast cadence, see what's changed within the last couple of days, and we're reporting results really quickly. So you release a show, you want to understand, are we going to get a renewal? What's going on with this show? This is something where you can see literally the day after the show launches, you're starting to get some signal on how is it performing, how is it holding. And that's really important information for people to know. We're also historical back to January 1st, 2022. So we certainly have a lot of historical data that we can go back, benchmark against. I'll show you some examples of how people might be doing that. As far as how we're actually getting to this data, so that M, that stands for modeled, because this is a modeled data set, just like every other third-party consumption metric for streaming that's out there on the market. So the way that we're doing it is we're leveraging ACR data. So we leverage an ACR panel that starts at 10 million devices that'll be connected televisions. That's normalized down to a panel of 3.4 million TVs. And that 3.4 million is balanced against census level data to represent the entire US population. We take the data from those 3.4 million TVs and then we model it to represent what is viewership across the entire United States. So when you're seeing the data in the system, when something has 1 billion minutes watched, that's going to be minutes watched across the entire United States, what we're modeling there. We've done all sorts of benchmarks. We've done private benchmarking exercises with most of the major streamers. We're also looking at everything that's publicly available. So any sort of top 10s that any of the streamers are putting out there, we're looking at all of that to benchmark our data and make sure that it's as accurate as possible. And then, of course, this is also something that we're releasing weekly in the Variety Top 10. As far as other things we're releasing, we do have some reports. We just released our gaming IP and franchise report, and we've got a few other reports on the way. So just something we like to highlight here and want to make sure people know about. Let me go ahead and move us now, though, into the actual platform. So I'm going to start, I'll go back and show you a chart page and show you some other information, but I want to go back into our platform. We'll just pull up the first 12 weeks of activity for Andor, because I want to get to the most exciting data that we have right now, which is this data that we have around demographics. So with this demographic data, it's really, really great data. We are using a anonymized household data that we're matching up with the data in the ACR, and it's giving us a view of not just what is being watched, but who is actually watching it. We did some research on this that we published in our Streaming Watch newsletter that went out last Friday. We can throw that link in the chat, so if that's something you want to check out. One of the things that we were looking at was we were looking at the mix between Hulu content and Disney Plus content and how they're really capturing these different demographics. So I'm not going to go through everything that we go through there. We do a lot of math on the data to really roll it all up. But even just at a title level, when we look at something like Andor, we're seeing this title, not a huge surprise for a Star Wars title like this, hit a bigger male audience here. We're seeing it skew a little bit younger. It's hitting some of that under 18 audience that we'd expect for Disney Plus, where Disney Plus is going to be performing really well with kids. Obviously, when you look at something like a Bluey or Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, then we're going to see really ridiculous numbers in terms of the kids' viewership. But even something like Andor, now I'm not expecting an 8-year-old is watching Andor or a 6-year-old, but probably some teenager that's going to be something where this definitely has some appeal. And then we're also seeing it perform really well with those younger audiences, but still perform really well with that 45 to 54 audience. But it is having that nice male skew. What was interesting when we were looking at this is how nicely it fits with their bundled offering when we look at what they have on Hulu. So for a great example of that, we can go to what has become my wife and I's new obsession, which is The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And with this show, we can see almost the opposite skew, pretty much exactly in gender. So we're seeing that 61% female skew. That's capturing just a different audience, and it's capturing these kind of millennial audience in that the millennial / Gen Z right in there, that 25 to 34 audience really, really heavily. This is something that was pretty interesting to us. When you think about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, you might think of it more like a Housewives kind of show, where the Real Housewives, where it's going to have maybe a slightly older skew in terms of that viewership. Now, those Housewives shows, those are coming from cable. They're not coming from streaming, so that's part of what's pushing it younger. But the other interesting thing is the stories of the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives originate from this thing called Mom Talk, which is a group of moms on Mormon moms on TikTok. So these are TikTok stories that are really expanded out to a very traditional unscripted format. And that's part of the reason that we're positing why we're seeing this really strong viewership in that 25 to 34 demo. But it shows really nicely how strong that Disney Plus bundle is, where they're able to capture kids, they're able to capture young adults, young either parents or kind of even folks that don't have kids in that younger demographic, and then have that nice difference where Hulu is going to skew a little bit more female. Disney Plus is going to, especially with some of that like fanboy content, like an Andor, like a Daredevil, skew a little bit more male and ultimately become a really compelling package for customers. And that's part of the reason that they've seen some success. And we can really dig into that when we're looking at our demographic data. Let's scope out a little bit and get into some of our chart data. So when we first get into the platform, we're going to see the top 10 titles across movies and TV shows. Ultimately, this data is what's going to be feeding into that variety original streaming chart that you might have seen. So we can see I went back in time a little bit, and I went to the end of May, and we're looking at the top 50 titles. So we can see Sirens, really, really, really strong performer for Netflix, and we'll get into that a bit more as we go through. And when I click on a title, I can see past performance. We can see how it performed in the past weeks. And we're going to go well down past that top 10. So we can get you a lot more depth than what you're going to be seeing when you're looking at that variety chart, which becomes really exciting to understand how these shows perform. Something like Landman has literally been on our chart since it premiered in November. It's just having a really, really, really strong hold. It's even though it premiered in November last year, this is probably going to be one of the biggest shows of this year just because of how well it's performed on the charts in a consistent way. Let me go ahead, though, and click in on your friends and neighbors and show you some of the granularity that we can get with our data. So when we get here, we can look at the minutes watched in the period that we're in right now. I can also adjust this time frame, though. So maybe I want to just look at the first 12 weeks of activity, which in the case of your friends and neighbors is going to cover all of the activity that we have for your friends and neighbors so far. So we'll see 3.8 billion minutes watched. We can also see this views metric. So this isn't going to be unique viewers. What this views metric is tracking is minutes watched divided by runtime equals views. This is a pretty industry standard metric to understand titles with different runtime. So if we're looking at, say, a movie that's 3 hours long versus a movie that's an hour and a half, the movie that's 3 hours, we would expect to have more minutes watched. There's more minutes available of that movie. So then that views metric helps us balance it out, get us to ultimately what is an average audience for that show. We'll see, of course, that split in terms of demographics that we covered on those other titles. We can also see the daily activity for this show. So this is a great example of something that's working really well for Apple. They're seeing a real growth in viewership when we look at this daily view. If I wanted something a little simpler, I can even look at weekly, and we can still really see that where it starts off pretty solid, and then it's going to go up when we get to that week of the finale, which is a really strong performance for them. We can also break this down at an episodic level. So we can actually see how the episodes are performing. We could spin this based on views, so we can see what is the drop off between episodes. How sticky is the show? How much are people sticking with the show after that first episode? This is one where we're seeing, a little bit of drop off after that first episode, but then it's really sticking really nicely as they go down. And, some of these newer episodes, they're going to see more viewership as they get more data, since there's just less weeks of available data for them. Let me open this up to daily. This is the episode trends view. So what we're looking at now is every line here is representing a different episode of your friends and neighbors. So here we can see they released those first 2 episodes on the same day. So we see the data for those first 2 episodes, a little bit of that drop off for episode 2, but then a pretty strong hold there. So we're seeing people continue to stick with it. And then we're seeing each episode as they come out, as you look at all these lines where they start, pretty consistent in terms of that viewership. And then as people have caught up, and this is something that Apple is really good at, is this building up week over week audience and ultimately culminating with people really got to know what's going on in the finale. We saw this with Presumed Innocent. We saw this with Severance, and Severance, of course, had really big word of mouth around that show and buzz around that show. And then we see this lift at the end here where we're seeing a little bit higher viewership in those first couple days for that last episode, which is a strong story for them to tell and something they can feel like is really successful there. So looking at it this way, we can see some understanding of success, but a lot of this can happen in a vacuum if we're just looking at it this way. And you can't understand just one show's viewership. When we're talking about 1 billion minutes, what does that actually mean? Is this show popular, Jimmy? Let me show you. So let me go into our comparison tool. So I can get here. I've already populated a comparison, but I can always get here from our little sidebar. And what I did is I brought in 3 shows. I brought in the 3 shows that I mentioned: Your Friends and Neighbors, Presumed Innocent, and Severance. It's almost like I planned this. So now what we can look at, what's really cool, is we're looking at things within the same time frame. So we're looking at each of these shows from when they were initially released. So what we're seeing here is this green line is Your Friends and Neighbors. really strong performance. We see Severance also has that big spike at the end. And Presumed Innocent also grows over time. You see that little dip. They have a little bit different episode lengths, so that's why we're seeing that. All three of these shows, really strong performance. They grow over time. One thing that was interesting when I was looking at this, though, is when you break it down at this total minutes level, your Friends and Neighbors actually a little bit bigger than Severance here. And I don't think that is lined up with what I've heard in word of mouth. There was certainly more kind of online buzz about Severance, but I think what's really interesting as we look at viewership data is there's so many things that you're not going to find if you're just relying on word of mouth and just relying on what you're hearing people talking about or looking at social signals. You really need to understand what are people actually seeing on their screen. And that's what we're getting with that ACR data and what we're able to model out here. And then we can find some interesting things like this where your Friends and Neighbors, it's not that Severance had a really strong performance. And of course, a lot of people were watching it, but we see that growth for your Friends and Neighbors and ultimately probably a bit of snowballing from the folks who picked up Apple TV for the first time to go ahead and watch Severance. One thing that can really put this in perspective is we can also compare to shows that are on different streamers. So let me bring in Sirens, and that's going to really push down all these lines. So Sirens, of course, has that Netflix drop where it's dropping all episodes at once. It's 5 episodes. They drop them all at once, but really, really, really big viewership for this show. So we're seeing it push down all of the lines in our comparison. When we look at total minutes, even though Sirens only has 4 weeks of availability, we're seeing really strong viewership. It's already beat out 12 weeks of Severance, 12 weeks of Presumed Innocent, about 9 or 10 weeks of your Friends and Neighbors. So that is a really strong viewership. And Netflix has a lot more subscribers. It's a little bit of a different playing field there, but this can help put things in perspective. We can put things in perspective even more because now going down this rabbit hole as I was preparing for this webinar, I looked at Sirens. I was like, wow, that is really a lot of viewership. We see Netflix shows do bigger than Apple TV shows. They have more subscribers, not a huge surprise, but that is pretty big. So how big is it really? So one thing we can do is, and I thought this was interesting, let's go back to March. And we can go from March till now of this year. And so we'll see, we're looking right now, March 1st to June 12th. And if we pull up this TV shows view, oh, I went way too far. Let's go backwards. We want March 2025. We don't need to go back to 2024. I'm okay with that. There we go. So now we're going February 28th, 25 to June 12th, 2025. And what we're seeing here is Sirens in that period is the third biggest show on Netflix. To be clear, Sirens has 4 weeks of activity when we're looking at this data right here. The Residence has a lot. That show came out in April, I believe. Ransom Canyon has a lot. There is a lot of available data for those titles. So Sirens being all the way up here at 3 is a really, really, really strong signal that this is a huge hit for Netflix right now. We can also even look at this at the episodes level. So Adolescence, of course, really, really blew up on Netflix. Huge viewership. So far this year, it has been the #1 episode on Netflix, was that first episode of Adolescence. But we're seeing Sirens, episode 1, episode 2, episode 5, all right up there, 2, 3, and 4. And again, I have to harp on this because it's just so impressive. I feel like is that there's just so little data for Sirens so far. There's still people who are able to pick up the show. It's still pretty new. There's still word of mouth for people to get around and talk about it and for it to get viewed more, but it is getting a lot of viewership for Netflix. So these are the sort of early indicators that we can see. We are sitting on this viewership from that first week and we were seeing, oh my God, Sirens, it is performing really well. You can see that in the Variety Top 10, but this is also something that we can really dig into more with all of this long-term contextual data right here within our platform. One thing I'll note while we're here, we can also break this down at a genre level. So Sirens, drama, of course, we're going to see that's one of the biggest genres on Netflix. Not a huge surprise, but we can certainly break that down and understand what are those broader trends. when we're looking at these various titles. So let me go ahead, and I also want to take you into, I'm done talking about Sirens. I won't keep gassing up Netflix for Sirens, though it is very impressive. But let me go ahead and take you into our ranking report. This is a really cool tool because it allows us to rank titles in custom timeframes, whatever it is that I want to look at, and it's going to rank acquired titles up against originals. So especially when we're looking at movies, where we're going to see a lot of those pay one movies, theatrical films perform really, really well on streaming. This is something where we can get some interesting information here. So maybe we want to look pretty broadly and look year to date. We can apply changes there. Look in genre all across movies, put that in. And not a massive surprise, but we're seeing really strong viewership for Moana 2 and Wicked. For reference, last year, when we did a ranking report for 2024, Moana 1 from 2016 was the biggest movie on streaming. So really doing ridiculous numbers. Of course, a lot of that is going to be kids watching it over and over and over. But when we were looking at that data last year, we were able to use that to really indicate, oh, Moana 2 is going to go crazy in theaters because the viewership was so big on streaming. We really expected that would translate to theaters. And of course it did. That movie was a big hit last year. We're seeing really, really strong streaming viewership for Wicked. So we were able to pull that out here. And I think it's very interesting to start to get a lay of the land and understand how are especially as a lot of the studios are changing their strategy. A lot of places are just starting to put movies theatrical and say, no, we're not going to do, or at least we're not going to do very many straight to streaming movies. This is a great view to understand what is the power of this. When you're someone like Netflix, you're still going to have really strong titles like Back in Action that perform really well on Netflix. They're going to do big viewership numbers on Netflix and be on par with these theatrical movies. But of course, we're seeing a lot of theatrical movies in here. Now, we're also seeing a lot of kids content in here. So kids are watching things over and over. We certainly see that when we're looking at the movies data as well. Conclave, another interesting one where we were able to really see the spikes. We were reported throughout the news, but when the Pope passed and the new Pope was selected, of course, doesn't happen very frequently. So we were seeing a lot of folks watching Conclave. So it was interesting to be able to track that in real time as well. Let me just check my notes and make sure we have everything that we want to cover. And I can show you that Conclave spike actually while we're here. Just give it a second to load. And please, like I mentioned, feel free to throw those questions in here. So I wonder when the conclave happened. It's right around here. So we're seeing, all these spikes. This is the spike right around the Oscars for conclave, right in March. And then we're going to see when the actual conclave was happening and when the Pope passed, we're seeing really, really, really big viewership for conclave. So we're able to see all of those insights around how this title was performing. So that's really an overview of what we have here in Streaming Viewership M. If you have any questions, I'm starting to see some of them come in, so please feel free to throw them in. I know we've been answering some as we go, but let me look and see if there's any questions that I can answer right now. Oh, how many acquired titles are you covering? That's a great question. So for acquired titles, we're not comprehensive with every acquired title that exists out there in the world, but we are tracking most acquired and library titles. We have over 5,000 titles in our system, and that's something that we're continuing to add on a rolling basis. And certainly as clients have titles that they want us to be tracking, and we're talking now deep library titles. Certainly anything that's new, anything that's original, anything after 2022, we're going to be fully comprehensive with those. This is talking about, TV shows from the 80s that we're going in and programming and making sure are captured by our ACR. Those are things that we're happy to take client feedback and bring those titles into the system. And then we're also adding on a rolling basis to make sure that ultimately we're going to get to the point where we're going to be comprehensive with those acquired titles. But we already have so much right now. And most of the biggest titles, the things that are performing well on streaming, we're capturing and bringing into our system right now. But that's a great question. Thank you for that. And okay, how far does the data go back? So our data goes back to January 1st, 2022. But like I mentioned, just to be clear, we will track titles that happened before. So like last year, Prison Break and Lost both moved to Netflix. We saw really, really strong viewership for those titles. So we were able to bring that data into our system, or we were able to see that data within our system and really see those spikes when they moved to Netflix and understand how big the viewership was for those titles. Okay, well, it looks like I am getting the hook, so we're all out of time here. If you have any questions and we didn't get to them, someone from our team will absolutely be reaching out to you to make sure that you get that question answered. If we're going to reach out to everyone who attended the webinar to see if you have any other questions, see if there's anything else we can help you with. We'd be happy to discuss how SVM can benefit your business and really get specific about what are the things that you want to look at, what are the titles that are most important to you, and we'd be happy to go into all of that with you. So if you have anything urgent, something you really want to look at in the next few minutes, the next day, please feel free to reach out to us. We're going to throw our email into the chat so you can reach out directly to that. If not, we'll be getting in touch with you to see if there's anything else we can do to help you. And if you are trying to get in touch with me personally, this is one of the last things I'm doing before I'm taking a little time for paternity leave, to spend some time with my 5-month-old at home. So I'll be taking some time off. So if you get my autoresponder, that's why. That's because this is the last thing that I'm doing and then heading on paternity leave. But someone from our team will be happy to assist you. And if you just want to pat me on the back and tell me how great this was, then feel free to throw it in my inbox and I'll see it when I come back in August. So thanks so much. Appreciate the time. Please let us know if you have any other questions. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.